Now let's see how we can use functions inside our game. So I want you to just copy this file from folder number 4 to our folder number 5, and I want to just rename this file from number 2 to number 3, and that's it. And let me also change the documentation for this module. In this video we are going to concentrate on two main things. The first concept is called as dry. That means don't repeat yourself. What this means is whenever we have some kind of a logic that is repeating, at that time we want to take the logic out and put that logic inside a function, and we can keep on using that function wherever we require it. The next one is what I've already shown you. This is called as single responsibility principle. That means we want to define our functions in a way that one function will ideally do one job at a time. Let's see how we can do all of these things. Let me go down over here. So here you can see that we have a list of all the superheroes and all of our supervillains. So what I can do is I can create a function that will return the list of all of these superheroes and supervillains as well. Now, why do we need to do this? The answer is we want to isolate parts of our program. Suppose you are working in a team and you don't want any other developer to add or subtract from your list of characters. So that's why we need to have some sort of an isolation. So let us create a function for superheroes and supervillains as well. Let me put a comment right over here. So this block is going to be for my superheroes. Let me define a function called as get all superheroes. This is not going to take anything, and let me take all of these things inside my function. And since I'm going to return a list of superheroes, I will also cut my line from 51 and I'll put it inside my function, which is right over here. I also need to return my list, so I'm going to use the keyword of return, and I want to return my list of superheroes. Now since my function is returning a list of characters, so the return type of my function would be like this. So this function is going to return a list of characters. Till now I have been using this keyword of final because I just wanted to show you that whenever we type everything in capital, that symbolizes a constant, and we don't want to change the value in the future. But these days your code editor and MyPy is smart enough to infer that if we write everything in capital, we can actually skip writing final. So I'm just going to take it out. What I can do is I can just leave final on this line number 40 just as a reference for you, and let me take it out right over here, and this one and this one. Let me save my file. If you just hover over any of the variable, you can see that we have the word of constant. That means MyPy and your code editor, they are able to correctly infer that this is a constant. Let us create one more function to get a particular superhero. In this function we can get all of the superheroes, but what happens if we want to get a particular superhero? And remember, this is a list of superheroes, so we can get a particular superhero if we know the index. Suppose the index number is 1, so we can return Black Widow. If the index number is 3, then we can return Hulk, and so on. So let's create a function to return a single superhero. Let's create a function right over here. So I can say define a function called as get superhero. This function is going to accept one parameter called as index of the type of integer, and let us see what this function is going to return. This function is going to return a character, but what happens if we can't find a character? In that case we also have to return none. So this function is either going to return a character or it is going to return none. Let's see how we can implement the logic. Let me add some documentation right over here. But before we can get a superhero, we need the list of our superheroes. But that's pretty easy. We just created an entire function for this. So I can just say that my superheroes is equal to the function get all superheroes, and that's it. We have the list of all our superheroes. Now let's see the logic of getting a single superhero from the list of superheroes. We already know how to work with indexes, but this time we have to be a little more careful. What happens if we get an index number which does not exist? That time our program will panic and it will exit. But we don't want this kind of a behavior. Let me go to my IPython shell and let me show you what I'm talking about. Suppose I have a list called as my characters would be A, B, C and D. Here you can see the length is 4. So I have 4 characters, so the length is 4. But my index number stops at 3. So this is my index number 0, index number 1, index number 2 and index number 3. We don't have a index number 4. Now what happens if I say I want to get characters on my index number 4? This is going to cause an error. Let's see what's happening. So as you can see, we have an error, and the error is the index is out of range. And we want to avoid this situation inside our program because we don't want our program to panic and exit. So let's go back, and here we can say if my index, so if my index is less than the length of my list of superheroes, only then I can have the right index number. So here I can say I simply want to return from the list of superheroes the superhero at the given index. Else we have some issue, and here I can return none because we can't find a superhero. Let me just save my file. Let's do the same logic for our supervillains as well. Let me put up a comment. These blocks are for my villains. Let us define a function, get all villains. This is going to return a list of my characters, and let me take all of these things inside, and then I also want to return my list, so return villains. Then we want one more function to get our single villain, so let me copy and paste this block. So this goes right over here. This becomes from superheroes to villain, and that's it. So now we have a way of getting a particular character and how to get a list of our characters. Now let's see where we can use this logic. The place where we want to use this is right over here on line number 98 and 99. Here you can see we first generate a random index, and after that we want to get a superhero given that index. Let me use the function right over here. But before we can use this function, as you can see, we have a block for the attack. We can create a function for the attack, and we can isolate this functionality as well. So let's start doing that. So let me add a comment saying that this is the main logic for the game, and I can define a function called as attack. This is going to return nothing, so I can say none. And let me take all of these things inside my function, so all of these things goes inside my function. Let us change this logic, so this becomes I want to get superhero from the given hero index, and this becomes get my villain from the given index. Just save a file, and you can see we have a bunch of errors. Let's start addressing these errors one by one. First thing that I want to change is this variable. What I mean to say attack is the attack number, so we can improve the name of the variable from attack to attack number. Let me change right over here as well. So as you can see inside my print statement, I'm using this variable. So this also needs to be changed from attack to attack number. There is one more finer point that I want you to think. If you see at the definition of our get superhero, we are returning a character or none. So what happens if we don't have a superhero or if we don't have a villain? In that case, we can't have a fight. Let's create some logic to handle this as well. So here after this line, I can say if I have a superhero and if I have villain, so my current villain, only in that case I can do something. Let me write a comment over here. So if we have a superhero and we have a supervillain, in that case we are going to have the attack. Else, that means we don't have a superhero, we don't have a supervillain. That means we have an error. So let me print out a message saying that error, no superhero or villains to fight. Now let us go to this line number 104. What happens if we have a valid hero and a valid villain? Then we need to have an actual attack. So all of this logic from line number 108 to 117 should go right over here. But we are going to create one more function to simulate the attack. If you're wondering why do we require so many functions, the answer is for flexibility. If in the future you have some more characters, if you are fighting scene changes, then you can change only a single function and the changes would be reflected throughout your program. So we want to have our program as modular as possible. That's the reason why we are creating so many different functions. First, let me invoke the function and then I will define the function. So the function will be called as simulate attack. Simulate attack. Now let's see what we need to pass to this function. The first thing that I want to pass is my attack number. Remember, we can have only 3 attacks, so that's why we have the range of 3 over here. So I can say the first parameter I want to pass is my attack number. Then obviously we need the superhero and we also need the supervillain. Now let's go down to line number 107 and let's create this function. So let me copy all of this. Let me go down, let me create a function. Let me say that define function, put my quotes. Let me add a comment. I also need to adjust the spacing because this is out of format. Now let's work on this function. So here I don't need the word of current. This has to go, this also has to go. It has to go from everywhere. So let me do a multi-select. So this looks good. Let me save my file. Everything is looking really good. Let me put a comment right over here. So this is the place where we are setting the live. This is where we print some nice message, and this is the place where the actual attack is taking place. But I'm not really happy with this logic. Here we are manually adding and we are manually decrementing. Let us create functions for this as well. You must be thinking that I have gone crazy. Why do we require so many functions? Let me ask you a question. Suppose tomorrow the logic of the game evolves and you have some bonus attacking power or you have some bonus life. Then what do? So at that time you simply have to change the logic in a single function and that's it. So let's develop this habit of making the logic inside different functions as possible, and let us try to stick to the principle of single responsibility function. That means I want my function to do only one job, and also in the future when we learn testing, at that time testing functions becomes a much more simpler job. So let's see what functions we are going to require. We are going to require one function to increment the life of the superhero, one to increment the life of the villain, and then one more to decrement the life of the villain, and one more to decrement the life of the superhero. So we require 4 different functions to do all of these things. So let me go to the top, and here just below the characters, let me put up a comment. So this block is for the life. Let me go below, and I want to take this variables to the top as well. So let me paste it right over here, and here we can start creating our functions. The first one was to increment the hero life. So this function accepts life, which is of the type of integer, and it returns nothing, so it has to return none. Let me put a comment. Now let's see how to use the logic inside of this. Here I have to operate on this variable, and if you remember the last video, this variable is defined on a global scope. That means I have to use the keyword of global to reference this one. So let me go down over here and let me say that I want to use the global variable of hero life, and let us increment the life. So I can say hero life is equal to plus my life, and that's it. We can also use the shorthand syntax, so I can simply say plus equal to. So let us copy and paste this one, and this time let us decrement. So I can say decrement, this becomes decreases, this becomes minus equal to, and let us do the same thing for our villain as well. So let me copy all of this and let me put it over here, and my hero becomes villain. So let me do a multi-select, and this becomes my villain. Let me copy and paste this one for the last time. So this one to decrement, so this becomes decrement, decreases, minus equal to. Let me save my file. Everything is looking really good. Let us go down and see what we are supposed to do next. Now once inside our function of simulate attack, let's see how we can use this functionality. But first let us set the types for our function definition. So the attack number is my integer, my superhero is my character, villain is also of the type of my character, and this function is going to return nothing, so I can say none. Now let's use the newly created functions. So we can use the function right over here. So I want to increment the life of superhero, so let me wrap this, let me take it out and write the name of the function. This was to increment the hero life. Same thing will happen here also. Let me take it out, put it inside my brackets. I want to increment my life of the villain. Let us do the same thing. So here first I want to decrement the life of the hero, so let me put this inside my brackets, and I can say I want to decrement the hero life, and let us do it here as well. And here I can say I can decrement the villain life. Just save your file, and we can see we have a couple of errors. So let's see what's happening. So what's happening is MyPy is complaining because of incompatible types. For now you can ignore the error, but let me try and explain what's happening. All of these errors will go away when we convert all of the characters into classes in the future videos. But right now what's happening is, if we go to the definition of our character, here you can see the values can either be a string or an integer. This is the thing that MyPy is trying to complain. It's saying that we can't add or we can't subtract strings right over here. So that's why it is showing this error. So let's move on and let's go to the next block. So this is the place where we are seeing if we have lost or if we have won the game. We can create a function for this as well. So I can put up a comment saying that this is for my final game status, and let us define a function called as win or lose. It's not going to accept anything, and it is going to return nothing. Let me take all of these things inside. We can slightly improve the code as well. On line number 164 and 166 we are printing a statement, so let us get those variables inside our function. So here they are. Let me take them out and let me paste it right over here. They have to have the right formatting. Let me put up some documentation right over here and little space. Let me save and see if everything is all right or not. Everything looks good, and we have a very nicely typed program. The last thing to do is just to define our main function, and we simply have to invoke it. Writing the main function is the most simplest thing, so we can just say, let me define my main function. This is also going to return nothing. So this is the place where we would start the game. First thing is we want to have an attack. The next thing is we want to check if we have lost or won, and that's it. The last thing to do is we simply have to invoke this function. So I can just say main, just save a file, and let me just browse if we have some errors or not. We can ignore this error as I have just explained, but let me check if we have some errors. No, everything is looking beautiful. Alright, so let's go down and let us try and play this game. Beautiful, it looks like I have defeated Thanos in the first try itself. It's amazing.